Good morning. We're going to get started. Sorry, I apologize for being a couple minutes late. But I was trying to address an issue that more likely will come up. So I won't say what it was, but we'll find out at the end to see if the issue comes up or not. If not, I'll tell you about it. Okay? So good morning, everybody. My name is George Linares. I'm CMS's Chief Technology Officer. And thank you for coming for this monthly Tech Topics session. So what do we have today? I know everybody probably, how many were at HIMSS? Raise your hands. All right, so I'm sure you've been in tons of meetings already. I didn't get a chance to go. Actually, it's okay. I don't have to be around 50,000 people plus in meetings asking questions all the time. But I hear there were some interesting topics and things that came out of it. So we're very excited with some of the teams that were able to attend from CMS, and they're bringing back up a lot of things, actually, and new ideas. So today, what do we have? We have AWS overview, and then you'll have me. I'll talk about the TRB and the technical, in the TRA, and then we'll talk about the VDC and the VPN, what's happening with the VPN and the VDC, okay? So I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so why don't we just get to it, and then we'll get started. So please welcome from AWS, Jesse, Dean, Michael, Baldwin, and Brett. Please, guys. So who will be doing the speaking?
I'll start.
Let's start. Oh, you
Okay. I'll go ahead and sit.
Yes. And the clicker?
Yeah.
That should drive that presentation.
Very good. You can hear me. This microphone's working. Thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to be here because we're hearing everyone wants to hear about AWS, and that's what we're here to talk about. So you're in the right place. Welcome. So my name is Jesse Dean. Like George mentioned, I work for GDIT. I'm a program director on the Cloud Computing Services contract. I'm here today with Brett McMillan from AWS. He will be helping me present today. A couple quick topics. We only have 30 minutes or so, so we'll try to get as much as we can in here in a short amount of time. So briefly, we'll cover AWS at CMS. Where is it now? Where did it start? And Brett will take over and talk about AWS itself in terms of services, the features and benefits of the services, and their cloud adoption model. So with that, let's go back a couple years, probably 3 years or so. I think most of us remember 3 years ago. And we've all heard of the Office of Communications, John Booth. CMS had an urgent and real need to support 3 critical applications. They needed a scalable infrastructure that was secure, that was available, and that could be implemented, in quick fashion. So they looked long and hard and quickly realized, hey, AWS meets all of these requirements. They leveraged the HHS FedRAMP approval, the ATO. They brought it into CMS. They went through the ATO process internally at CMS and made it available as a GSS for any other application team within CMS to leverage that CMS ATO on top of the HHS FedRAMP ATO. And within 90 days, they were up and running. They had production workloads on top of AWS supporting healthcare.gov, medicare.gov. And in the end, open enrollment period for that year went well for Office of Communications. Year after year after year since then, they've had no issues in terms of AWS application, the infrastructure component. More and more application teams have noticed that success. Adoption has grown for the Office of Communications, as well as other application teams within CMS. So fast forward 3 years to where we are today. Like I mentioned, GDIT has the contract for cloud computing services, essentially provides AWS infrastructure support under the VDC IDIQ. Today, there's over 9 business owners that use this. I mentioned OC as one of the founding fathers, if you will, of some of this Silicon Valley technology. The need from 3 years ago that continues to take hold. CMMI, CCSQ, CMCS, RPDG, just a handful of business owners that leverage the AWS infrastructure today here at CMS. many different applications from public-facing websites, Medicare.gov, to big data analytics, the work that Jack Fletcher and his team are doing with CMCS. The footprint, pretty impressive. I think folks are familiar with the VDC data centers and 3,000 instances across AWS. That's a pretty big number in a short amount of time. And I say it continues to grow. Other growth is around the list of approved services that AWS offers. So the 6 existing AWS services provided under the FedRAMP ATO are obviously still in effect. We recently received risk acceptance for an additional 15. Those are in fine print down at the bottom. I think most of you can read those, but ECS, RDS, SES, SQS, to name a few. And actually today starts our SCA audit for the GSS to go through another ATO process we went through last year. So this was our 3rd one in, I guess, 3 years. So they're coming fast and quick just because of the pace of change across the environment. And included in that, we're looking at Docker and PCF and some other technologies that weren't part of the environment just a few years ago, or even 6 months ago for that matter. Part of the CCS offering provides a robust suite of shared services to include Splunk, Trend Micro, and other security tools that all the CCS members can leverage. That way they don't have their own Splunk throughout AWS. It's one shared Splunk. They can share that cost. And the other thing, fast, right? It's cloud. So right now, once a customer comes on board, funding is in place, we can have VPCs available for application teams in a matter of hours. So it's real quick. It's fast. And then the last point is the increased level of DevOps maturity. So there's been a lot of talk across CMS. I've been to a few of these over the last 6 months. And what does DevOps mean for CMS? And what the CCS program is doing is really part of that conversation and driving that conversation forward. So again, very, very exciting. A lot of change going on right now across CMS in terms of the VDCs. Quickly looking ahead, the future, obviously more customers. We continue to see a number of application teams and business owners come on board, submit the application process, working with Jeff Cernick and his team in OIT. There's their process on the last page of the slide deck. There's a list of contacts. So if you have questions about the task order or AWS or what GDIT offers, please reach out to Jeff and his team. They do a fantastic job, and they'll put you in touch with the right folks. Also, they have a new sandbox capability now. So if you have a need and aren't quite sure if AWS is right for you, talk to Jeff about that sandbox capability too. We'll let the dev teams have an opportunity to play without going too far into the deep end. Other future capabilities, we're looking at more AWS services in addition to more customers, lowering costs, and then I mentioned briefly Pivotal, some sort of platform as a service, a PaaS layer to add just a layer of abstraction to the infrastructure so the developers can really focus on what they do best, is developing and pushing code, and they really don't care about the infrastructure, what servers are underlying. It's just let me develop cool code and get it out there as fast as I can. All right, so the last slide I'm going to talk about, again, this is very high level. It's meant to depict the AWS infrastructure and CMS as simply another VDC. So everyone knows there's multiple VDCs within CMS currently. The Baltimore data center is obviously, well, in my mind, one of the most recognizable ones. The AWS Cloud has a connection through CMS.NET through AWS Direct Connect, and it provides a dedicated and secure connection to other VDCs. So you can have all cloud, you can have a hybrid option, you can access resources across each of the VDCs very easily through this setup. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brett McMillan from AWS, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the AWS service itself, benefits and features, and their cloud adoption model. Thank you.
Great. Is it okay if I stand? Great. So thank you very much. As he said, I'm Brett McMillan. I work with, my team work with all the civilian agencies of the federal government. Here today we have Kevin Froke and Brian Williams, and they are focused on helping out CMS with their AWS adoption. If you go back to 2006, Amazon launched a cloud service company, and they called that Amazon Web Services. We call it web services because cloud service is a internet accessible, self-managed, elastic service that you pay for what you, only what you need. And when we launched that service, that value proposition of not having to guess what your infrastructure needs are, having something that can expand out and be highly reliable and highly secure, was such a strong business proposition that you go a little bit more than a decade forward to today, and we have millions of customers on AWS in over 190 different countries. And we're having a wide range, anything from small businesses to some of the largest enterprises in the world running their most mission-critical apps on AWS today. I went backwards. I'll figure this out. All right. Great. And some of that value prop people see once they get into starting to do things on cloud computing. And when you look at how people are doing things in the traditional way, often if you wanted to do something, run a new application, try out something new, you had to ask for those resources. And those resources, depending on your organization, might take days, weeks, but more often months to get. And in cloud computing, you don't have to wait for that. If you need an additional server, you just spin it up, and in minutes you have that there. And you can spin up one, you can spin up 10,000 in minutes. And we have controls in there making sure that that fits within your budget to scale up and scale down. And so what we've been seeing is that as you're doing that, organizations now can iterate and move a lot quicker, because in the past, when somebody was wanting to try to do something, if it took them months to just test something out, a lot of developers just gave up. They're like, I'm not even going to try this because it's going to be 3-4 months. Today, they can get an idea. They can try it. Most of our services are a couple dollars per server per hour. It might cost you $100 to try something pretty cool, and then you can then go through the whole process of dev, test, pre-production testing, and moving it in production. Hold on. Yeah. The number one reason that organizations tell us, the commercial organizations tell us that they move into the cloud, is for agility. It's kind of funny because we do a significant cost savings, but organizations tell us that the number one reason that they come to us is to be able to do things quicker, easier, making changes. As I said earlier, I get to work with lots of federal government organizations, and what they tell us is when they go into the cloud, their biggest surprise is they didn't know how much they were constricting the developers. When they, in a typical data center environment, you take all of your best equipment and all of your best resources and you put it into production because you want that to work. And most of the times when people go into the cloud, all of a sudden their developers are doing things faster, they're moving quicker, and those systems become more responsive to the citizens because they're able to roll out services quicker and easier. And so when you talk about organizations can't afford to be slow, most of these groups that go kind of heavily into the cloud are surprised at how fast they speed things up. AWS has I mentioned that we have customers in 190 countries throughout the world. When you think of AWS, I mentioned earlier that it is a self-service model. You are in control of your data. You're in control of where your data goes and how it goes in each one of the locations. We have regions throughout the world. Each of those big dots are 14 regions that we have throughout the world. CMS has chosen to operate in 2 of those regions, here in Northern Virginia and in Portland, Oregon. And each one of those regions is set up, if you will, almost like an independent cloud. So you're able to put things into that region, and it stays in that region until you make a change. But we have a philosophy that that customers should, from a security point of view and a management point of view, wherever they go in the world, it should feel the same. So each one of these independent clouds functionally are working the same to the greatest extent possible. It's important to understand that how we define a region. A region is a group of a bunch of data centers. These data centers are relatively close in that we keep them within about 50 miles from each other because organizations want to do things like synchronous replication and things like that. And then we group our data centers into something we call an availability zone. Picture an availability zone as several data centers across the parking lot from each other. And a region will have 3 or more availability zones. They're geographically separated, different power subgrids, different internet providers, different floodplains, et cetera. And what that gives our customers the ability to do is very quickly and easy build some very highly available applications. It costs the same to bring up 2 resources in a single availability zone as it does in one availability zone and one in another. So this idea of doing highly available services happens very quickly and easy. And in traditional infrastructure, that was actually pretty hard to do. And yet you can do it with a few clicks today. Our leaders like to say that there's no compression algorithm for experience. We've been doing this for more than a decade. Prior to that, our parent company, Amazon, was running some very large data centers to get all those packages to your door when you're ordering services. And what we have found is that as we start doing more and more of this, we start rolling out more services. And as we grow, we get these economies of scale, and then we innovate. And that lowers our cost. And we then turn around and we drop our price to our customers. That brings on more customers, allows us greater economies of scale, more innovation, and we continue what we refer to as virtuous cycle, this flywheel that continues to spin. So in the 10 plus years that we've been doing this, we've dropped our price over 50 times. And roughly a little less than once a quarter, we tend to drop our prices, and there's no reason why you shouldn't expect that to happen into the future. That's kind of central to our philosophy, is that as we get additional cost savings, that our customers should benefit from that. The other thing that you get when you move into AWS is I mentioned that we have millions of customers. We also have a very wide ecosystem since we've been doing this for so long. And customers are building software solutions on top of us. There's many systems integrators that are working with us. So when you go into Amazon, you can do things like go into our marketplace and say, I want to get this software for an hour and try it out. And then you can pull all that together. And that has become a fairly large portion of our business, because in the past, it went back to how it used to work in the past, when you'd have to spend time, work out a software license agreement, do these things, and maybe 3-4 months later, you can actually try it all out. We make it so that customers can do that fairly easily in our environment. I mentioned innovation. We are constantly rolling out new products and services, and about a third of our new products and services are security related. And if you can see, when I started back in 2011, I thought it was pretty amazing. We rolled out 80 new products. Last year, we rolled out over 1,000 products. Now, most of our customers don't use all 1,000 of those. They might use storage, compute, and start with that. But when you come to AWS, you automatically have the ability to use those additional services. Now, we talked a little bit about getting them compliant within CMS and FedRAMP compliant, and we're working through getting those services so that you have a broader breadth. But we expect to continue this growth rate and bring out new services. And so while a lot of customers might start with us for storage and compute, they very quickly realize the benefit of doing things like a managed data warehouse or a managed database or artificial intelligence, or all these types of services we're rolling out to our customers that they can take advantage of. Security. With so many customers, we spend a lot of time making sure that we're both secure and our customers know we're secure. So we work through multiple different security accreditations. Here, you're probably most concerned with FedRAMP, which is the FISMA implementation, as well as HIPAA. And so all of our locations run the same controls. And what that means for you is that even though you as the government might be most concerned with FedRAMP and HIPAA, since we run the same controls throughout the world, what we'll do is we'll pick the high water mark for everything. So here, all of our North American locations are FedRAMP certified, but all of our locations throughout the world run those same controls. So you actually benefit from some controls that like might be required from ISO or or PCI or some other things that the government's not asking for, because we want to make it a common experience throughout the world. I mentioned that about a third of our new products and services are security related. A majority of those we don't charge for. Things like being able to log exactly what's happening and to be able to see that log, to give identity access control. We can get very granular, so you can say this person can do this but not do that. There's a variety of other things that we have. Data encryption. It depends on how you want to do data encryption. We think that if it's information that you find important, you should absolutely encrypt it. It can be as simple as clicking a box in your console and say, encrypt all my data, to saying, I want to control all of my keys, and I'm going to have a key generator here at CMS, and Amazon's never going to be able to see that key generator. And then we have multiple flavors in between where you can manage your own keys on AWS. So we've got a fairly robust solution of security products. Working at the scale that we work out, we have the ability, and we hire a tremendous number of security engineers, and to the point where very few organizations can have as many people and put as much effort into security that we do. And what they're doing is they're securing our part of it. We like to talk about a shared security model, because security is very, very important, and we spend a tremendous amount of time working on security. We also want to make sure that our customers have the tools to lock down their portion of the environment. So we're doing things like we're doing the physical security of the data center, the logical isolation, making sure that customers are separate, and then giving customers those tools like I talked about, like granular IAM controls and logging and permissions. And so we focus on all that. Our customers, it's their responsibility to implement those tools that we provide. Click a box, say turn on logging. Click a box, say encrypt my data. And in addition to that, there are many software companies that have built software tools on top of AWS. So things that we don't have natively, other companies will build services that work natively in the cloud, and you can get those software tools. So when you combine all those together, most of our customers come back to us and they say that they can quickly and easily achieve a security level on AWS that would have been really hard and very expensive to do in their own data center. In fact, it's not unusual for folks to say they've actually increased their security posture and increased their view into what they have when they move into a cloud environment. You know, we love talking about those customers that are all in on AWS, and we've got some fairly significant size customers that have said it just doesn't make any sense to run their own data center. University of Notre Dame is shutting everything down, going to AWS. Netflix shut down all their data centers, and everything you get from Netflix is running on AWS. But by far a majority of our customers do some sort of a hybrid environment. They want to use AWS, they want to use their own data center, they probably want to also use another cloud provider. We are very comfortable in that environment. In fact, we build a lot of tools and services to allow that environment to happen, whether it be federating your IAM or other services that allow you to work in that multiple cloud or hybrid data center and other cloud environment. So when you're thinking about going into AWS, some services are 100% on AWS, and that's your choice. And you can go back and forth. And if you are completely on AWS and you come back to us and say, we want to split this up or somehow make it in a hybrid environment, reach out to our folks supporting CMS and they'll help you do that. So when we talk about this, we see this happen over and over again. Jesse talked a little bit about how CMS got started with AWS. That's often how it happens. There's one application that for whatever reason you need additional reliability, scalability, and that would come into AWS. Other ways that we've seen customers start with us is start with dev and test, and then after they get comfortable, they move up the stack into production systems. It's interesting, I've had multiple government customers say, we want to do our disaster recovery and our COOP in the cloud, but everything else stays in our own data center. I've had a number of those in time have come back and they've said, our DR and COOP is staying up more than our own environment, and so let's swap this model and actually use our own data center to be the DR and COOP. But it's really up to you on how you want to move forward with that. And this kind of walks through after us seeing multiple customers on how they start using AWS. I can say that CMS is one of the more mature customers within the entire federal government. You have gone from, let's try this out, to let's set up some processes, and now with GDIT doing things, it's getting to the point where it's almost as easy to deploy in any of your environments because we have the processes set up to allow that to happen. And that's what should happen. Is you should make those decisions on where to put their application, not on how hard it is to get there, but where is the best place for this to run, and where is it going to be the best place to run long term. And so I would say that if you look at these 4 stages, you're to the 3-4 stage, and very happy with the work that's been happening. In fact, I point multiple government agencies to the work that CMS is doing because you've gotten out here and really have embraced the cloud and understand how to use it well. So we have about 10 minutes left. I think that's the last question. I'm going to pause and see if there's questions from the audience. Yep. And I'm going to, there's people on this.
Thank you. My name is Gangesh. I'm from CNSI. I work for the MPPG group here at CMS. My question is on the security. I know the solutions that you mentioned is about FedRAMP solutions. Wanted to find out from a control family perspective, how many of the installs at CMS, both East and West, let's say Virginia and Oregon, how many of them qualify for the FISMA or FedRAMP high, low, and medium in terms of if you can elaborate on the breakup and maybe a categorization of those?
So for our services that are approved for CMS use, our Virginia and our Portland are for FedRAMP low and moderate. We have a separate one that we call GovCloud that's approved for FedRAMP high workloads, and we have multiple different customers in that FedRAMP high environment. Jesse, did you have anything specific on that, Dad?
I think you answered that. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Can you use the mic? Okay.
Hey, good morning. I'm Quintus Brown with Half Acre & Associates. Great job, guys. Really glad to see the progress. Quick question. If you look at the trend of a lot of requests for proposals, there's 2 common elements. One is agile, 2 is cloud. So for those contractors who are proposing cloud solutions using AWS, how do we determine what the appropriate pricing is or the appropriate mechanisms to make sure we're leveraging the scale that we can have access to with the existing infrastructure rather than proposing a one-off solution that's a separate AWS cloud solution?
Yeah, and so we've developed these cost calculators to estimate the cost of moving to the cloud. One of the things that's a little scary for, especially in a government scenario, is when we say you pay for only what you use, and it can scale up and scale down. What we have found, though, is that when you look across these environments, they're remarkably stable. And we're almost always able to do a cost estimate for it, which is, if you will, worst case type of estimate. Even on developer accounts, you think you're going to take a bunch of developers and say, just go play. Well, they only have so many hours in the day. And what we're finding is that those environments tend to be relatively stable. So if you're looking to bid on solutions, my team can work with you. And what we like to do is work with you on what the conceptual architecture looks like. And then we can put all that into our cost calculator. The complaint that we almost always get back is that as we are continuing to drop our prices, and I mean, they've been huge drops. I mean, like our storage price in the short time that I've been at Amazon has dropped more than 90%. The complaint we normally get back is, I never used my entire purchase order. But we can help you on what those high and low ranges are going to be and take that risk out for you. Did you?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. And I think that's a great point, the simple calculator. But specific to CMS, I would encourage you to work through your core and contract officer, because I know there are a number of RFPs that come out around the application development side, like you said, agile and cloud, with reference to the existing work on the VDC, IDIQ. Again, work with the core and the CO. Carrie Arun is our core, and Ben Simcock is our CO, and they might be able to help you connect those dots in terms of planning around proposals.
Hi, I'm Kate Woods from CMMI. I think my question is more generated towards the respective Georges in the house. One of the things I saw was a cloud first and how CMS is going to be driving that. And I think the other thing is, as I've had the joy of putting 2 applications up on cloud, is a better understanding how IUSG and ISPG are going to be working together and how the security applies to the different services, because there's a few things that have made putting Million Hearts in Oncology on the cloud very interesting at times.
So I mean, cloud first is not new, right? That's our first federal CIO. That was one of the 20 points that he made. And what you've seen today is the execution where CMS is. I'm glad to hear we're in a further quadrant. We're in number 4 stage. We are making several efforts. I think your question may be related to the services, and I was hoping that will come up, because there's always, I like to clarify, because that's one of the biggest questions I get. So there is a number of FedRAMP services that are part of the FedRAMP list. And we know that FedRAMP itself is they have a large queue in terms of new services coming up. So working with ISPG, really what we've come up to is new services can be used. And what we want to do there is making sure, since they're not part of the FedRAMP, you can still add them as part of your project so they can be ATO. Now, a bonus to this is working with IUSG is once those services get ATO for the project, we want to migrate those to the GSS. So then anyone at CMS can benefit from it. So that's the approach, because I get that question over and over. I have a service, it's great, because you guys are moving so fast at AWS, but FedRAMP is not there. So that's how we're trying to handle it. So the services need to be ATO'd, just like any new product that will come into the enterprise. But then we add in the bonus and working through the process to make them part of the GSS. Okay?
And I can add to that a little bit, because I spent a lot of time working with the FedRAMP office. They were purposely, deliberately going slowly so that they weren't making any mistakes early on. So our first 5 services took us a couple years to get approved. We've had over a dozen services in the last couple months, and we think that the pace at which they approve services is going to greatly increase. And we've learned, too, on how to approach them and how to provide those packages that make it easier for them to approve.
And I do have a follow-up. You mentioned that Trend Micro. We're still trying to get Trend Micro to work with Million Hearts in Oncology. So, because when we went up, we couldn't use it. It wasn't extended out in AWS, so we're still using ClamAV. Do not get me wrong, GDIT is great and they're fabulous, but we're still waiting to hear that some of the things have been resolved. I think it's just because we're a little bit different. We didn't use Portal for uploading our files. So, but still, we're working on getting Trend fully enabled into the AWS, and would kind of like
So
to
you'd
move-
be glad to hear actually that the portal team
Yeah.
is working on a file upload and download at AWS, which will be exposed in the
And-
form of APIs.
Yeah, and we're looking to potentially utilize that down the road. The challenge that we had when we went up was it was like a 2-minute lag, and that just was not acceptable for the business to have people wait 2 minutes for the files to get from portal over into the application, so we just went directly from the application. But that's where we're still working to get Trend in place, because, and we are actively I'm keeping a track of where portal is with their file upload, but I also would have to factor in what it would be to move to portal versus, and throwing, potentially not using the application, which we've already made the modifications to. So it's kind of a catch-22 for us, but we're still looking for the Trend piece of it.
Okay, okay,
So-
so we'll follow up. Maybe a consult with the TRB may help because I know there's a
Oh,
lot
We've
more
had a few
details.
consults with Thurston and
So-
Company.
Okay.
I have them on speed dial.
Okay. I don't know, so this is all the time we have for this topic. Any other questions, anyone? And if not, I want to highlight something real quick that it's a couple more questions there. Okay, one sec. So one thing that is key here is one slide that Jesse covered was about the extension of having AWS be an extension of the enterprise. And that is the vision. Why? Because we want to allow interoperability across the enterprise. So that's very key, by the way. I mean, in all of the security at the end of the day, from AWS Enclave to the VDCs, everything goes to that CMS Security Operations Center. Okay? All right. So 2 more questions. Go ahead. If you can come up to the microphone, that'd be great.
Yeah, Tony Wise from CGI. So I have a question more around how are the services that we use in existing apps getting made available in AWS? So things like EUA, MBD, these kind of things. So if we plan on migration, is there a plan on getting those things available, or is it more of a migration to a AWS service to replace?
So EUA specifically, I know we just released a new EUA version out there. We are looking into EUA to see what the future will look like, but we will share that later. But it is part of our consideration from the IDM perspective for CMS. Yes.
Sam Weinstein of Half Acre and Associates. So Jesse mentioned earlier that it takes a couple hours to stand up a VPC. So,
Yes.
right,
Well,
that's great.
Yeah, once funding is applied to the
Okay.
contract. Yes.
So my question is, how would that work as far as auto scaling in AWS? How can you take advantage of that if you have to sort of pre-plan how many instances, et cetera? How
Sure.
would that
So
sort of work? Okay.
when I
Thank
say VPC would be ready, that's the initial environment, the footprint, right, where the dev teams would deploy their EC2 instances and EBS volumes, et cetera. So in terms of auto scaling, we're working right now to get that officially approved in the SCA that's ongoing right now. So technically, auto scaling, it was just recently risk accepted and is part of this SCA. So that's a little bit of a different conversation where app teams would have to understand what those trigger points are and what those auto scaling groups would be, and design their infrastructure or their network to support that rapid growth of those EC2 instances based on those triggers that they set. That
Just a follow-up,
Okay.
which is really geared towards CMS, is because when you're dealing with that auto scaling, how do you predict as far as funding is concerned? Because that's
Well,
where
the way I look at it is kind of like your data package on your mobile, right? That you have with your kids. If you don't keep an eye on them, they're going to run it up and you still have to pay. There is no different with AWS. There has to be a clear expectation working the developers and the business owners. Because we've seen the case in a couple times with the developers where you're trying to do as many things as possible. And they didn't know until the bill got there to them. And they were saying, you utilize, let's pay for what you use, and they get it. So we have to plan when are those peaks are going to happen, when are you going to be using that, so they know that this is going to be part of it. And I know there's other things that can be done from a monitoring perspective, that they can be more, those reports can be accessible more easily and timely, so you can see exactly what the consumption is, so there's no surprises.
right.
Okay?
And
Real quick,
Yeah,
George,
please.
just like to George's point, the more the development team knows up front in terms of sizing the environment, and we do provide weekly financial reports, and Cloud Checker is a new tool available to all customers, and they can go in real time and see their spend on a daily basis to help monitor in terms of their overall cost.
I'd like to thank
Thank you.
Brett and Jesse. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, guys. So now you have me. So I'm going to talk about the Technical Review Board and some of the things that we're doing that is different. And everything is related here, okay? So the good thing about Tech Topics is we're talking about technology, how technology is changing, but at the same time, I'll let you know how CMS is moving, changing its standards, its vision, and things like that. So I cover a lot of those things here. So some of the basics, right? So this is a specific Clear and Cohen, FITARA, you know. At the end of the day, we are covered under the CIO policy framework that was signed last year. All of the TRA, the TRB, it's all connected. As we all know, FITARA gave a lot of more responsibilities to the CIO in terms of all the IT investments. So we're right in line. So CMS has all those policies in place so we can have that authority working with the CIO and the CTO. So what is the Technical Review Board? We've changed. We used to be known as the Spanish Inquisition, right? Where we will come to see us and we will say, you're not doing this right, do it this way, do it this way. And it's evolved because at the very beginning, the TRB really, the agency was like the Wild West when it came technical compliance, development standards. It was very hard to understand what we had in terms of assets and how the systems interoperated with each other. We've changed that a lot. And that's thanks to many of you here because you're part of it. It's been a journey. I mean, the TRB has been around since probably 2006. But now we've evolved. And the way I look at it, and I tell the TRB members all of the time, even the new members that come and join us, is it is a service for the agency. Why? Because it's become a knowledge body of all this information. Looking at every IT review, IT system that comes through the TRB, we're able to see what's happening. Plus, I want to be sure the TRB is connecting with what's happening across the agency as well. So it's not just a TRB in a silo, but it's a part of a service that can tell you, is one forum, what's happening with CMS when it comes to technical standards and direction. So yes, they conduct a system lifecycle governance. You'll get letters and things like that because by FITARA to be making sure that you are going through the process, making sure you're not deviating. And I know in the contractor community, there's changes. It's not the same team. There are some contractors that I can see in the room. You guys been around for a long time. Others change, you know, industry changes. So we're there to help it. We understand that sometimes those documents that we have may not be 100% clear and sometimes there is room for interpretation. So the TRB is there to help you as well. So we provide lessons learned. Integration and interoperability, which that's what I wanted to make the point about AWS, right? We didn't want the AWS to be just a silo in the cloud because that doesn't help us. We wanted it to be integrated with the agency, with the enterprise. So you can talk from AWS all the way to the Baltimore data center or any other VDC. So interoperable. And that's the key because our systems are, if you look at the ecosystem of CMS and the systems, every system needs data from somewhere else, beneficiaries, providers, and there's no reason to really recreate assets when the information is already there. Plus, you always want to get the information from when the system of record is, not just from a copy, from a copy, from a copy, which is how we used to operate in the past. Reuse and information sharing, absolutely. I mean, AWS, it was created, and I mean, it would be so difficult for somebody else to create a new AWS out there that it's not integrated. All the work that has been put in place, we tried to make it so hard for you to create a new AWS out there. But if you want to, the cost is going to be so high. It's going to be outside where we are in the end. So reuse is key for us. And that's what I'm hearing, that's what we want to be moving forward as well. Technical guidance and, of course, any strategic IT direction. We do have two things that the TRB offers. Consultations, which is just a discussion with the TRB. Questions going back and forth. We heard this, we heard that. Is this permissible? Can we do this? Sure. And you'll get an answer. And then, of course, there is the official XLC reviews, which are the ones that you have to follow per the development life cycle of CMS. So we've grown. I work very closely together with the CISO, and actually now we share a suite. So we're right next to each other. IT governance is key for us. Yes, there is the TRA, the oversight, the consults. We do work with the compliance and audit, so that's what we integrated with CFAX, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And of course, the TRA as well, and the diagrams that we're trying to create as samples to make it easier for your teams to sort of convey the technical solution, which is one of the ones that we truly need to understand. And we want to make sure the CMS, the teams, the GTLs, or whomever is overseeing the PM, understand those designs that are being proposed and developed by our contractor community. So again, if you put it all together, it's meant to be an enterprise service. So the TRB, it is a little busy. So I won't cover all of it, but the key in this slide is to talk about which ones, or to highlight which ones of the different reviews are TRB, under the TRB purview, and which ones are project level. Under the TRB, you have the preliminary design review, the detailed design review, the operational, the post-implementation, and the disposition review. And the architectural review sort of fluctuates between TRB and the BATS board. So we're still working that out, especially since we just had the reorganization. Anything else outside that falls on the teams, project teams' purview. You know, the project baseline review, the investment selection review, some of the requirements and things of that nature that are more project specific. The TRB really wants to, we've made so much progress now with all the contractors, you know, that we try to more assess the overall direction of the design. And the details sometimes they are needed to some degree, especially when it comes to software and so forth, but we're getting better at it. So that's the good news. That's what I see. And by the way, although I'm not at every TRB review, I am listening in. I am always there somewhere looking at the letters, looking at the presentations, because I still get all of those things in my calendar. And I want to make sure that I stay in tune, because it is important for me what's happening at the project level to equate to what's happening with the enterprise level as well. The volumes. So we were pretty high around, let me see, 2010, 2011 was our highest point, and we trend down. Things were trending down, and now in 2016, things went back up. Yeah, which is okay. I mean, that's just the direction. There's no reason. It's not bad or it's not wrong. It's just how we moved. But when we started keeping track of numbers back in 2007, we started very low. But you can see how, and I keep these stats because it's interesting to see how the agency sort of evolves. So what we see definitely is consoles are our number one reviews, really. It's the one sessions that the TRB holds the most. And I'm okay with that, really, because it's a forum for you to come and talk to us, to come and talk to the team. And I'd much rather have those conversations up front than coming at the end, because there is little time to react, and then who gets impacted? The business owner. And if they don't have a design that is compliant and it fails the ATO test, then they won't go live, and that's where the impact comes in. So having more consoles versus other reviews, to me is, I don't think it's a bad thing. To me is hopefully the comfort level that I see from industry and projects to come to the TRB and have those questions up front. Reviews by components. I use this in many instances. OIT or OTS is still leading. CCSQ actually is second this year. Who's the third? CPI. And last, CM. Oh, not last, I mean after that. So it changes, it trends. But I mean, we're trying to keep track to see how we service our components. That's one metric that I use internally as I meet with the different leadership, is this is what we're doing for you. Make sure they understand that they are coming. And by the way, one of the things that we implemented last year is when you get a letter, that letter, we also create an internal report that goes to all the TRB members and technical advisors. But in addition to that, I do generate a report that goes to all of the box types across the agency. It's a dashboard that I create, and it goes bi-weekly. Why? Because I want to make sure that they have insight. I want to make sure they're not surprised. You know, most of the projects go to them is green. There may be a yellow, meaning we have a concern. And we have a red, we have a big problem. Because then there's no surprises. So I want to make sure the information not only goes to the teams from the bottom up, but also that the leadership understands what's happening within their components as well. So just so you know, they are getting this. They're not getting all the details. They get access, the links and so forth, but at least they get a little bit of an insight as to what's happening with that project within their components so they know. I'm all about transparency. Hopefully you guys have seen that through the last 3 or 4 years I've been the CTO at CMS. Our membership, obviously, is the CTO is the chair, and I have 2 vice chairs, Doc Margush and Steve Avery. And then we have the TRB support, the Office of Technology Solutions that needs to be updated, and then the agency membership. And I'm getting more and more membership from across the agency. And again, you know, one of the things, and this is not so much for the contractors, but for the feds, is view the TRB as a place to learn about what's happening across CMS. And I'm trying to use it in multiple purposes, right? One, you can influence the direction, because anytime we're going to change something from an IT perspective, those at the table on the TRB get the first opportunity to really review what we're trying to do. And you have the opportunity to influence those decisions in a direction as well. But also, you can bring the information back. And I'm trying to find every which way to get the information that I have at these forums, the decisions that get made at the leadership perspective, to get communicated across the agency. It's very hard with a large agency. As you all know, everybody is very focused on supporting their programs. So sometimes getting all these emails, you know, it becomes like noise. So having a member, bringing it back in different forums really helps, not only to learn what's happening at CMS, but how can you use some of these tools to advance your own program. These are the TRB contacts, cms-trb@cms.gov, cms@hhs.gov, and this is where you contact. This is monitored. They're very responsive. If you need a consult or any type of project or a session with the TRB, they'll get to you. And all of our reviews always have a webinar. And all of the materials for the TRB are in SharePoint since the beginning of time. Or reviews, or sign-in sheets, or letters, everything is there. So we're very transparent. And we want it to be transparent. I know some contractors cannot access that information, but all of the feds have access to it. So if you ever want to go back in time, the information is there. Okay, CFAX. So this is something that we introduced last year. Where now findings, only findings, get added into CFAX, and then they need to be managed. Like it will manage any findings in CFAX. So that's still working today. We haven't had any issues with it, and we will continue working through that process. And this is part of the audit piece now. Questions about the TRB before I jump over to the TRA? Crystal clear? Who has not been to a TRB review? Oh, okay, that's good to hear. Good to see. Yes.
The findings that are going into CFAX, are all of the TRB findings security related? How do you make that connection between something that is a technical issue to something that belongs in the security realm?
I'm so happy you asked me that, actually. So you notice in every letter, every finding has an associated security control with it. So we're mapping every TRB finding to a security control that is part of the CMS's ARS, or the acceptable risk safeguards. So that's how we keep in sync. Just like an ATO does. Whenever you get a finding on an ATO, it says this is because security control SC10, blah, blah, blah. That's the finding. And that's how we keep them in link to be sure they're all applicable to the ARS. So that's a lot of effort. Trust me, this guy's got to do that mapping. So, okay, the TRA. So, The technical reference architecture, it definitely communicates. That's my attempt. As technology changes, industry is evolving, virtualization, cloud, that is the vehicle that we want to have to convey that to you in a written format. That's the formal way. And again, we want to ensure there is consistency in architectural practices. It's evolving, it's changing. But we need to have some sort of standards. Otherwise, we'll go back to the days of back in 2005, 2004, when two systems that were hosted in the same data center, they will communicate with each other through file transfer. Believe it or not. They will send one file to the system that was next door. And then that was overnight. That would take 24 hours to process. And there will be exceptions. And then the exceptions were sent back over. We were in the same room together. It's like me sending you an email even though you're right next to me. You know, that's how we used to be because we didn't communicate. So we've changed. We're not there anymore. We've evolved, but we still need to come up with some sort of standards. The keys for me of the standards is securing the data. That is the asset, the CMS data. And two, to be sure that there is interoperability across the agency, regardless of where the system is, whether it's in a virtual data centers or in the cloud. To me, that's the key. Otherwise, we are at a silo. We're creating silos, and that's what we do not want. In silos, then promote redundancies, unnecessary redundancies. Redundancies are not bad, but if they're managed, if they're done on purpose, if that was the direction of the design, but just creating redundancies because you can't connect to an asset and you create copies and copies, then you're moving your way further and further away from the truth. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And I'm hoping that as we move in through the cloud, that will not change, and it hasn't changed. We've been able to make that a reality with AWS. So as CMS expands other cloud options, we will have the same model to be an extension of our enterprise. And who knows, maybe AWS can go from, workloads can go from AWS all the way through the VDC to another cloud and back if there is a need for it, not just to do it. But I want to enable that because there may be a need for it. And I don't know. So a little bit of history. The first version of a TRA came out in 2003. It's go through a number of versions. It's grown. And now in 2016, before the latest change, we used to have 25 plus volumes. And the issue with the 25 plus volumes is we will update one document and then the other 24 will not have some of the same information. And there were inconsistencies. So what we were trying to do is, how do we keep the information consistent and be able to update it more rapidly because things are changing rapidly. So in 2016, we went from 25 plus to 5 volumes. And that's how we're moving forward now. The 5 volumes has architectural views. There is the foundation, the network, infrastructure, development application, and data management. They're very simple. We're hoping that all the information that you need is there. But now if you only care about application development, you just download the 1 volume. That's it. Everything about it should be there. The one thing is, it has not changed, is that we are technology agnostic when it comes to application development, right? We're trying to ride the wave of industry. That's the way I look at it. Industry changes. I want CMS to be able to ride that wave and change it. Why not? I mean, the good story about AWS is it started out as an OC. And it is very important because this is how we're operating now. It started in OC, one component. I see that as what they call, a grassroots effort. They went for it, they put it out there, and the agency saw the value to it. And then it was adopted, and it was brought over to be managed in a more enterprise-wide. But that's how I see it. I mean, the IT organization doesn't know everything about IT. There's a lot of components doing good IT out there, and if we see it, we're going to take it and enable the enterprise to use it. That's one example, right? But technology agnostic, I'm hoping that will get us there, so we can leverage everyone's innovation, not just what the IT organization has, and then we will see. And I tell you, the business is very keen and out there. They are listening to you. But again, it has to provide the value to the agency. The TRA is evolving, it's changing. It used to be very infrastructure centric. We're trying to sort of create a balance. So this is just some of the material. We're trying to remove a lot of tutorial things. We're going to have releases just about every quarter. So keep an eye on that. So they will be out there. The biggest thing that is changing, and that's why I wanted to quickly jump to this because I know I'm running out of time, is we've gone from the zone-oriented TRA, the zones, where we're saying 2 different brands of firewalls. Well, guess what? In a virtualized world, such as AWS, there is no firewalls. There are security control groups, right? So how do we implement that? It's kind of hard. So we're trying to go a more service-oriented TRA. And the example below, what it's trying to depict, and I don't know how clear it is, but this will be incorporated in the new, revamped and updated application development TRA, which is being worked on right now. The point in here is not so much to be so physically centric to the zones, but rather to abstract that and try to be more focused on the modules and components and create rules as to how many hops an application has to go in order to get to the database. Because we want still the data to be on the innermost part of the infrastructure. We want to protect the data, make it as difficult as possible to be hacked. If you can't read it, it's okay, but we are changing. Well, I want to be just beyond in this DevOps, containers are really changing the way we're doing things. So the new TRA will have information about containers, how to handle that, how we think the best practices will be. And we are working with Office of Communication. They are moving with the containers. They're doing a pilot. So we're taking a lot from what they're doing from an execution perspective and ensure that it makes it into the TRA. Okay, but this is coming up. This is one of the priorities I have for this year is to change how we do application development and make sure that the developers have a clear understanding of that. How to get involved, CTO office, TRB is always there for clarification. If they have any questions, they always have my ear, and they know how to get to me. The TRA, I know I have a couple minutes here. So what we did in here is we want to help you, the teams and the contractors. So what we did is we developed templates for architectural diagrams on the types of information we want you to think and we need. Why? Because you cannot depict a system on a single page. It is impossible. There are so many perspectives on a system. So what we did is we have one swim lane for the overall diagrams that it talks about the portal integration, standalone, and an API web service type implementation. We have that. That's one aspect of it because that's a reality. Which one are you using? You're coming to the portal, are you standalone, or are you using an API? Then we created perspectives, the architectural perspective, software, security, performance, physical, and hosting. If you think about it, all of you know that you think about those things. But sometimes you don't put them down in paper. And when you come to the TRB is looking for a lot of that information. So I'll cover real quick. Architectural, we want to get a full context of the system. Whether you're agile or not, you still need to define the full context of the system. At least because you can't build a house without knowing what the house is going to look like. Even if you want to go agile on the kitchen. Yes, you can create a kitchen, but if you don't know what the kitchen is going to be in a house, guess what? You're not going to have an unhappy customer. Same thing with the system. I understand about agile, but you need to have a context. How is the system? What are you aiming for from a scope? Maybe it's the first release. What does it look like? Once you have the overall architecture, then go agile. Do as many sprints as you want to and multiple swim lanes if you want to of development. But you have to reach an angle, right? Security perspective. We want to know where are you encrypting, where are you not encrypting, what's in the clear, what's not on the clear, and things like that. Are you integrating with the CMS Security Operations Center or not? For the most part, if you're using our infrastructure, you will be by default. But still, we want to know, make sure that you understand that. The software stack perspective, right? So you got to use software if you're going to develop a new system. So we want to understand what does it look like? What are you using? And the reason for this is, and it's not just because we want to sort of be very intrusive about it, but we want to understand what types of open source. We are open to open source. CMS has embraced fully open source technologies. But we want to make sure that the open source that are being proposed are ones that at least we have some level of reach back, some level of knowledge. Yes, innovation is good, but with innovation comes risk. So if your system is able, from a business perspective, take that risk, go for it. But if you have a high visibility, you're using a brand new 1.0 type open source, and you're in a critical path to develop, we're going to make you think. And say, listen, is this the direction? How comfortable is the team we support in this, using this brand new language? And you are in a critical path. Does it really make sense? Or can you use something that is more proven and perhaps your team is a little more comfortable with that? Those are the types of questions that we ask, because it's not a one open source that will fit everything, right? It's all situational in many times. So we're becoming more like, if you want, like a financial planner. We need to understand a lot of things before we can tell you, go 100% stocks. It all depends on the level of risk that you can take. So technology is sort of becoming sort of like that, in understanding the level of risk that the business can take and how critical those deliverables are. So we need to know that. Performance, how we want to scale, if it's not in the cloud, if it's in a physical or a traditional data center, we want to make sure you understand that. The physical perspective of it, that's pretty much self-explanatory. And the hosting. And the one diagram on the bottom there is I'm trying to depict what AWS slide said. Our VDCs are integrated to the cloud, but we're also using SaaS software as well, like Salesforce, ServiceNow. So how do they integrate to our operations? Because they still need to be integrated. Loosely integrated, but they need to be integrated. So if you put all of those things, it's impossible to put all this information in one single diagram. You will go crazy. So we're trying to help you just to think of a lot of things, especially from a project perspective, so you can convey the information in a way that we can understand it and make sure there's no miscommunications. All my information, I know it's not available for contractors. It's in SharePoint, CTO Corner, but we're working on that. There may be a pilot at some point, and this may be available to you guys. So we're always working on something. So this is just what CTO Corner looks like. Calendars, and I think that's it for me. Questions, and I know I went fast, real fast with a lot of the things here. Yes, Tony, please. So Tony's one of the contractors who's been around for a long time, so
Yeah,
he should know
a little while. So hey, George. So as we're looking at maybe a little bit in the future, but as we get more and more smaller, quicker releases of things, more service-oriented, getting towards DevOps and things, do you see a more streamlined TRB process to review those smaller pieces, or do you think the current ones that has that big deck is
so
okay?
remember that the TRB is there to review the design of the system, of the services. Once the design is approved, as long as you stay within the context of the design, you can do multiple releases as you need. You're not changing that design. Once you deviate from that design, then obviously the question is not only TRB, it's also security. Does that invalidate the ATO or not? But if there is small increases incremental, and it is all within that design framework for the most part, that requires a console. I mean, we'll talk. I mean, when the design comes, I will advise always to be transparent as to what your plans are, so we can help you and come up with a plan with you. Any other questions? No? You guys already knew all of this, right? Yes? Hopefully this is helpful. Again, if you have any questions, the TRB is the best place, even if the question is for me, to go through them, and then they will find their way towards me. So next, the last, and if you can think of more questions, just let me know, because I'll be here till the end. I'm going to have Dave Paradis talk about the VPN at the BDC. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, let's start off with thanking George for putting such tough acts to follow in front of me. We're going to talk about the virtual private network today. Different ways to connect to CMS infrastructure, different ways to secure your connections. The objectives, again, we're going to be going through an overview conceptually. We'll go through an architectural diagram, not in excruciating detail. We'll talk about different use cases and details, architecture, job codes, how to submit for job codes, best way to get approvals, and the role of the CMS VPN in the security posture. Virtual private network. Basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to extend our network segments to less than secure locations to allow CMS employees and CMS contractors to continue doing their jobs. CMS, a VPN or virtual private network is a method to add security and privacy to private and public networks. They're all encrypted. It's all very secure, and they track each and every individual login. They track points of origin. They track what's being done over the wire. For an organization looking to provide a secured network, we have security, we have cost savings, and network scalability. Security is the big one, and on the right-hand side, you'll notice kind of the main reason why people choose a VPN, rather than opening up your doors, opening up to jump servers that would allow access from the internet. You're going to have a secure encrypted tunnel that only allows access to systems that you designate once they've established a connection and authenticated. At CMS, we use multi-factor authentication PIV cards. We also accept RSA tokens, but the RSA tokens, which are not HSPD-12 compliant, HSPD-12, as everyone knows, 2004, the HSPD-12 mandate, we're going forward with PIV cards. We use secure socket for remote user access. VPN infrastructure allows CMS employees and contractors 24/7 access to not only the public interfaces, the SharePoint sites, the EUA sites, the Remedy sites, but we also offer access to admin band, to dev band, security band, BI tools. A lot of people in this room, a lot of faces I see are familiar with a lot of those bands already. Oh, sorry. Voice only goes so far. And again, like I indicated earlier, respective IHICS functional teams monitor the VPN infrastructure. Remediation components are monitored via the Tivoli Network Management System. We use Cisco Works, security configuration and compliance of the VPN tools. They're monitored using Tripwire. Log files, they're sent to Splunk for review and analysis. We set up filters that automatically flag an alert based upon activity. Once successfully authenticated, network access or network admission control, performs posture on your recent Microsoft patches and your antivirus version. Super DAT files, date they were last updated, and validity. If a workstation fails to meet patching requirements, access denied, and the user is prompted by NAC to remediate their workstation via WSUS and or update the appropriate antivirus definition file, super DAT file. It's a fun fact. The CMS VPN is intercepted, and again, this was a month ago when I created this deck. CMS VPN has intercepted and blocked 67 legitimate users connecting remotely from foreign IP space and intercepted over 79,000 VPN intrusion detection system events in 2016 alone. CMS VPN supports CMS mission by enforcing and monitoring CMS security standards applied to VPN connectivity. Now, if you notice up above, 67 legitimate users. Why were they intercepted? It's important to follow your CMS policies and guidelines when preparing to travel abroad. HHS GFE, government furnished equipment, is not permitted on unofficial personal foreign travel. In addition, permanently issued GFE devices are prohibited from foreign travel. They offer loaners, and there is a full policy at the far end of this link. The base connection. This is the native network, native external network or Wi-Fi connection in a standard use case of the VPN. It's considered by many to be best practice to never connect to an unencrypted network or Wi-Fi, even if the ultimate anticipated use case is to establish an encrypted VPN. You'll notice down at the bottom, danger-free Wi-Fi, unencrypted. There were actually incidents where government employees were targeted at hotels. They'd find out it was a government employee, and they would try to sniff that connection to see what was being done prior to the establishment of an encrypted tunnel. On the right-hand side, you'll see a lot of our standard gear, the VPN gear, the web proxies, McAfee Policy Orchestrator, and on the inside, CMS app, generic CMS app. Using Cisco AnyConnect client or AnyConnect client agent and selecting a profile, AnyConnect checks the Microsoft patch levels and antivirus DAT version for versioning and status. If any patches need to be applied, AnyConnect downloads and applies them to make the PC compliant. There is a VPN website that's a little further along in the presentation. It states no Macintosh, Unix, or Linux desktop client support is provided. It's Microsoft. PC is issued an IP address from the CMS Dynamic Host Control Protocol pool of available IPs on a 24-hour lease. McAfee Policy Orchestrator scans the PC for malware periodically, and the WebSense proxy appliances monitor and prohibit access to restricted or compromised websites and content. And if you follow the green line, that is pretty much inbound through the internet, through the VPN gear, back into EUA to validate what you should have access to based on your job code. That in turn gives access to the CMS app. But the whole time that you're connected, the policy orchestrator on the reverse red line, that goes back and it's checking your machines. The components that make up the CMS VPN. We have VPN appliances, a 10,000 user license that was just recently upgraded. We just did a grand overhaul of the CMS VPN. The ISE NAC appliances, 7,000 user license on them. Microsoft patch verification, antivirus updates. We have switches, a DHCP pool. That's variable, that can be sized based on demand. Right now it's sized, oddly enough, for the worst case scenario. And we'll talk about that a little further. Dedicated DNS copy. It's not our standard DNS, it's a replicated copy that lives on the VPN gear. Centrally administrated granular VPN authority. That's all courtesy of EUA and the job codes we're all aware of. Multi-factor capable, PIV card preferred, RSA token accepted. And the current footprint of all this gear looks like this. It's a little bit of an eye chart. I'm not going to really go into a lot of detail on this. If anybody wants to go through the technical nuts and bolts of this, we very definitely can. More fun facts. I spared you guys the noise that went along with this. CMS experienced its largest number of concurrent connections in January of 2016. Snowzilla dropped 3+ feet of snow on the Baltimore area, and this was prior to the tech refresh of the VPN. We were still able to amass over 4,400 concurrent connections and sessions. This is in support of CMS's mission to continue operations and availability during periods of inclement weather. What about the job codes? This is the centralized granular VPN authority. To satisfy availability, auditing, and accountability responsibilities for all personnel requiring remote access, the VPN profiles are centrally administered within EUA. VPN profiles are requested by way of the EUA website by a CAA or an individual and are granted and are reviewed for several criteria before approval is granted. The business justification is huge. Absolutely spare no expense when writing that up. Here are some good tips that are not only useful for petitioning for a VPN job code, but for any job code and even remedy tickets. Typically these things come in, if they come in from a user, there has to be there has to be a much higher level of documentation in a business justification in order to get approval. If it comes in from a CAA, that kind of helps expedite the process or the approval process, because a CAA certified or CMS access administrator should know what the personnel are doing. They should know what their people on their contracts are doing. So again, by following these steps, this actually helps with remedy, it helps with EUA job codes, it helps across the board. So why the access is needed versus another access method. What roles or environments will be supported with this access? What will be done with the access once gained? What CMS project or initiative is this in support of? And what is the name of a CMS sponsor or champion for that initiative? For more information on CMS job codes, again, this is internal and external sites accessible from CMS or from the internet. You enter your 4-character rack FID and password, and look for the link for the VPN job code cross-reference. If you go to this website and you get rid of that download at the far end, that actually has links to EUA. It has links to this and some other documentation. This is an eye chart. We're not going through it, but it's important to note that the headers for the columns. The EUA job code, obviously enough, is the name of arbitrary contractor job code. The justification on the right-hand side, it gives you a few details on what we're expecting in the form of a justification in order to get your access granted. Very important is that third column, conflicts. When we redid the VPN, we also redid the documentation, and we created this eye chart. It's an Excel spreadsheet. When you download it, it's not quite as horrifying to look at, but the conflicts are very important. The conflicts are one of the bigger reasons why VPN job codes get rejected. And you'll also notice SCMS in there. SCMS is one that's very important to pay attention to. SCMS, Smart Card Management System. That guy conflicts with a lot of the non-PIV card contractors that we talked about. Again, if we can go all PIV, a lot of these conflicts go away. More fun facts. CMS VPN provides access to CMS employees, developers, administrators, and security personnel around the clock every day of the year. VPN job codes provide access to over 6,500 CMS employees and 10,800 approximately contractors. CMS VPN empowers all CMS employees and contractors to support availability, operations, security, and forward progress whenever that support is needed. This is kind of an overall view of the different components and how they help bolster the CMS security posture. Firewalled connections, multi-factor authentication, host-based security controls. Those are the controls once you've gotten past VPN. VPN only gives you access to the wire. It doesn't give you access to servers, systems, anything other than just the wire. At the far end of that connection, you have host-based controls. Those are the things that sit on the servers. We have usage monitoring, which is what we talked about earlier about foreign IP addresses and what people are doing over the connections. Compliance monitoring, it's your versions and all that. Job code requests, which we just got done discussing. Business owner reviews, whenever a job code comes in, it has to be approved by business owner of the job code. And operational oversight of the entire smash. Everything from VPN job codes to the VPN gear itself, we monitor in IUSG. And I think with that, we're at questions. Please. Well, I don't know. Maybe this is closer.
That was quick.
Sam Elias with Rely Group. You mentioned that because of the security requirement, you're moving out from RSA tokens and issuing PIV cards for accessing the VPNs. And we're running into issue that we're not getting PIV cards for our employees because there's no budget for them to do PIV cards and the background checks, and we're not getting the RSA tokens, so we're in a situation of not accessing the systems. Is there a workaround with this? Could you please advise what we need to do at this point?
Well, the RSA tokens are basically made available for contractors that are having problems with their PIV cards, contractors, a good case in point, a contractor that was working on a project, and he's a good contractor, he knows what he's doing, so he gets onto another contract with CMS, not working on the same project. Business owner of the old contract took the PIV card.
Yeah.
At completion of that project, they took the PIV cards and sent them back to badging. Contractor still needs access, had the RSA token to get access until such time as he could get a PIV card.
Okay.
But going forward, the methodology since 2004, further reiterated with M1111, is to use multi-factor authentication using HSPD 12 compliant gear such as PIV cards.
Does that answer your question?
Not
You're
really,
saying
George,
that-
because we have several new resources that came onto projects. We've been waiting for the last 3-4 months to get the PIV card, and we added the job code. They're on the EUA, but they're not getting the PIV card, and we cannot access IDR and other systems and
Right.
CCW. So what do we do at this point?
He's saying that the RSA token is the workaround, if I'm hearing that correct.
The RSA token is more of a workaround than it is a methodology going forward.
Okay, so we can go temporarily try to get some RSA tokens. I guess.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Right, it's giving us the funding excuse that no funding available. Yes. Right. Thank you.
Do we have-
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? Please.
One more?
Yeah, more.
I have a question again, but I think QPP program is including MFA, multi-factor authentication using Okta solution.
Mhm.
So you mentioned saying that the PIV cards is the norm going forward. So are other MFA solutions acceptable in addition to the PIV cards?
To George's point, a lot of that is under review at TRB, and
He's saying, I mean, from a second token, right? From a second factor, if it's just PIV cards. No, I mean, no. So external users don't have PIV cards, but they still need to comply with the multi-factor. So we do have other solutions in place where they can comply with that. I think employees are PIV cards, contractors are PIV or RSA tokens, but then external users have other options available to them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
any other questions?
No?
Nope.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. So, yeah, by the way, I do have a Microsoft Pro and Surface, and I do have a PIV card for it too. So it's mandatory for every device we have. Couple things. Our next tech topics will be March 28th, and we'll talk about Corporate Executive Board, which is a subscription that CMS has. If anybody with that CMS email can get to it, it's kind of like a Gartner. Actually, Gartner just acquired them, but there's no change yet. And then we'll talk about AWS framework, and this is the framework within AWS. Once you get there, we have a specific way for developers to follow when they're developing applications within that environment. So that would be an interesting topic. We also have the CMS Edge Forum, which is our quarterly forum. Again, this is another where I'm trying to, I started this out of my own benefit really because I wanted to see what industry was doing, and I've opened it up to others. And actually, we're going to be Gartner will be there to talk about containers. We're going to talk about the DevOps. Actually, CEB will be talking about DevOps implementing. And then our infrastructure team will talk about workforce enablement tools and where we are and how we're moving forward. I mean, that Surface Pro is one of the pilots that I'm conducting. So we are thinking more. I mean, the theme here is what else is out there. We don't want to be zeroing on our successes. We want to keep pushing the envelope. What's better for CMS employees and all. So the other thing was for you to stay here to the end. I'll share with you why I was late. So many of you probably, who was a Sea Scout? Anybody? Now is the conference, security conference? No one? Really? I'm shocked. Okay, so there was a topic that came up. HHS signed a memorandum of new policy in December about security encryption. Now the policy dictates that there should be encryption at rest and there should be encryption in transit. Of course, CMS acceptable risk safeguards follows the HHS policy. So that's also the ARA has taken that new, which in the past, as we all know, we haven't done that. We haven't done security at rest or we haven't done security in transit because our intrusion detection systems have to be able to see all the in-transit information so we can inspect for malware. So we are looking. So I was actually meeting with the CIO and trying to determine how to move forward because this will impact many of you, systems, ATOs, all kinds of things, right? So there will be more information. So I just wanted to let you know that we know there's C-Scout, there was a lot of concerns that were brought up about this new HHS policy, now CMS ARS policy as well. And we are changing the TRA to sort of be in conformance to it, but we don't want it to just say, hey, security says this, good luck. So we are working, that's my message, to see how can we sort of implement this across because it will impact a lot of systems. And then there will be further communication coming out. We're working with the CISO and the CIO and be sure that we'll let you know what we can do to ensure that that transition is smooth without impacting the business. But so more to come on that. Okay. See, good information, right hot off the press. Any questions in general from anyone? No? Well, I'll see you perhaps March 8th or the next Tech Topics. Thanks.